Today we are going to read about the fatty acid metabolism. So in this video we are going to read about the fatty acid synthesis and the fatty acid degradation. So you have to note two important points. The fatty acid synthesis requires citrate that comes from the TCA cycle, and that citrate is transported to cell cytoplasm with the help of citrate shuttle, and all the other synthesis of the fatty acid occurs in the cell cytoplasm. Whereas the fatty acid degradation starts from the cell cytoplasm, and with the help of kinetic shuttle, the fatty acyl coenzyme A is transported to the mitochondrial matrix, and eventually the fatty acid is break down into ketone bodies, and the acyl coenzyme A is transported to the TCA cycle for the further metabolism. Now let us start the fatty acid metabolism. So we have a citrate in the mitochondrial matrix. We all know that the citrate comes from the TCA cycle. So the citrate, with the help of citrate shuttle, it gets transported to cell cytoplasm. The previously citrate is in the mitochondrial matrix. So the citrate will be transported to the cell cytoplasm with the help of citrate shuttle. The citrate shuttle, you have to know that it is present in the mitochondrial matrix. So this citrate will be transported to the cell cytoplasm. After this, citrate is transported to the cell cytoplasm with the help of the enzyme citrate lyase. It gets converted to the acetyl coenzyme, and the acetyl coenzyme, with the help of enzyme acetyl coenzyme carboxylase and the CO2, gets converted into the malonyl coenzyme. You have to know that this carbon dioxide comes from the biotin, and finally the malonyl coenzyme is converted to the fatty acid, eventually the palmitoate, which is the 16 carbon fatty acid. So this is how the fatty acid synthesis occur in the cell cytoplasm through the citrate. So now let us talk about the fatty acid degradation. You have to know that the fatty acid is degraded into the ketone bodies, and the acetyl coenzyme from the fatty acid is transported to the TCA cycle for the further metabolism. So now we have fatty acid, and this fatty acid combines with the coenzyme A, and with the help of the fatty acyl coenzyme A synthetase, it gets converted into fatty acyl coenzyme A. And with the help of the carnitine acyl transferase and the carnitine shuttle that is present in the mitochondrial matrix, the fatty acyl coenzyme A is transported in the mitochondrial matrix. So we have fatty acyl coenzyme A in the mitochondrial matrix. So this the carnitine acyl transferase is the rate limiting enzyme in the fatty acid degradation, and it is inhibited by the malonyl coenzyme A. So the excessive amount of the malonyl coenzyme A inhibit the carnitine acyl transferase. So now we have fatty acyl coenzyme A in the mitochondrial matrix. So the fatty acyl coenzyme A, with the help of acetyl coenzyme A dehydrogenase, is converted into acetyl coenzyme A. We also call it as the beta oxidation. There are various reactions in the beta oxidation. We will discuss that in detail in another video, but you have to know that the fatty acyl coenzyme A is converted into acetyl coenzyme A with the help of enzyme acetyl coenzyme A dehydrogenase, and there are series of steps involved in the conversion of fatty acyl coenzyme A to acetyl coenzyme A. That series of steps are known as the beta oxidation steps of the fatty acyl coenzyme A. And the acetyl coenzyme A is eventually converted into the ketone bodies. And the conversion of the acetyl coenzyme A and ketone bodies, there are various steps in between. Various process of ketogenesis are present that we will also discuss in the next video. And the acetyl coenzyme A is transported to the TCA cycle for the further metabolism. So this all occur in the mitochondrial matrix. So here in the fatty acid metabolism, again I am going to revise. We have discuss about the fatty acid synthesis and the fatty acid degradation. The fatty acid synthesis occurs mainly in the cell cytoplasm. This involves the transport of the citrate that it present in the mitochondrial matrix with the help of citrate shuttle, and that citrate is eventually converted into the fatty acid, which is usually palmitate, which is 16 carbon fatty acid. And here in the fatty acid synthesis, you have to know that acetyl coenzyme carboxylase is the rate limiting enzyme. The fatty acid that is present in the cell cytoplasm combines with the CoA coenzyme A, and it converted into fatty acyl coenzyme A, and this is transported to the mitochondrial matrix with the help of carnitine shuttle, and eventually the fatty acyl coenzyme converted into ketone bodies, and the acetyl coenzyme goes into the TCA cycle for the further metabolism. So in the upcoming videos, we will discuss detail about the ketogenesis and the TCA cycle. We have already discussed in the previous video. So these are the two steps, or the main thing you have to know in the fatty acid metabolism: the knowledge of the fatty acid synthesis and degradation of the fatty acid. I hope you understood this lecture. So this concludes our video on fatty acid metabolism. Thank you.